Can one little tablespoon change your life? We're going to talk about cultured food and how adding a little bit of cultured food to your daily meals can boost your immune system, strengthen your mind, and set you on track for emotional stability.
Welcome to Thriving Launch with Louise Congdon and Kamala Chambers, the show for heart-centered entrepreneurs who want it all.
5 days a week, we bring you different segments to inspire you to live a life of freedom. We interview the leading experts in the field of business, health, and love. Be sure to check out Training Tuesdays, where we give you a clear action plan to grow your own business. Maybe you can relate to this. When I was a full-time coach, keep repeating the same things to people over and over and over again, and it got to be kind of draining, and I wasn't really enjoying what I was doing anymore. So what I decided to do was record the things that I had to tell clients over and over and over again, and then I packaged those recordings together and sold them as an online course. If you're interested in creating and selling your own online course, head over to thrivinglaunch.com, and I have a free training for you on how to create and make passive income through your own online course.
Today we'll be speaking with Donna Schwenk, cultured food expert. She's the author of the 2 best-selling books, Cultured Food for Life and Cultured Food for Health. She helped her daughter overcome illness and sickness using cultured food. She's been helping people around the globe utilize cultured food in a way that most of us would be astounded by, and all of us really need to listen to today's episode so we can have more health and vitality with Donna Schwenk of Cultured Food Life.
Hey, Donna, are you ready to launch?
I am.
Oh,
Thank you for having me.
It's so great to have you here, and it's a different kind of interview for us and one that's really near and dear to my heart, having a background in nutrition, and I would love for you to just kind of lay the foundation. What are cultured foods?
Cultured foods, they've been around for millenniums, and they've just were a way for people to preserve their food and keep it safe when they didn't have refrigeration for many, many years ago. And there are things like, yogurts and cheeses, things like that. However, today, many of these foods, pickles, krauts, are all canned and heated. But these fermented foods that I talk about, or cultured foods, are not heated. They preserve the probiotics in them. They're not made with vinegars, and they have billions and billions and billions of microorganisms that enhance the vitamins that are in the food. For instance, in sauerkraut, naturally cabbage has about 50 milligrams of vitamin C. When you ferment it and put probiotics in it and it cultures, you get 700 milligrams of vitamin C. And that's through the alchemy of fermentation. And what that does when you eat it inside the body is extraordinary, because you and I are 100 trillion bacteria. And eating these foods enhances that and allows your body to do the many things that it's supposed to do.
When I think about foods that have been sitting around for a while and they're fermenting and then I'm supposed to eat them, there's a natural kind of repulsion that I have. And I know it took me a while to kind of just get brave enough, courageous enough to eat cultured foods. And they're not so bad, but at first it was hard for me to eat them because I would see them, and you see this like glass jar that you can buy, or you can do it yourself. And these foods they're actually living. Yeah.
Yeah. And we've been trained to think that. And, well, here's what's happened. Everybody thinks that bacteria is bad. And we've just been trained that way. There's antibiotics, there's antibacterial soaps. And what we don't realize is that you and I are 100 trillion bacteria, that it's mostly keeping us well. 99% of the bacteria inside of you is healthy or harmless. And without it, you wouldn't even be able to breathe. It's keeping you well each and every day. And it's just such a unbelievable amount of extraordinary things that it does inside the body that we just don't know or understand what it's doing. So when you've got something fermenting on the counter, let me explain this. There's so much good bacteria in that culture. Like, say, for instance, it's got vegetables. There's so much good bacteria in there that it dominates and keeps out pathogens and keeps the environment safe. So harmful things can't happen. Botulism is a scientific impossibility when you're culturing vegetables. And that's what's so cool about it, is that it really makes the food safer than even raw foods. And that's because of the large amount of good bacteria that's contained within them.
I'd love to hear a little bit more from you about the effects of cultured foods on the mind. How does that affect mental focus?
And I just wanted to say, as you talked about these foods, I got this image of like a cabbage with a cape and it's like superfood, superhero food. Is it okay to refer to cultured foods as superfoods? Or is that
Oh,
wrong?
yeah. Yeah, I call them epic foods because they go beyond superfoods because they have these living organisms in them that, okay, inside of all of us is a little city or a whole. It's actually, there's more bacteria inside of you than in the Milky Way galaxy. And what it does is that they set up these little camps. Different strains of bacteria set up these little camps, and they need numbers. They need large numbers to grow and multiply and do their job. And they reduce inflammation. They keep your blood sugar stable. They help to make these chemicals in your gut that go to the brain that keep you calm, that keep you feeling, as you said before, how does it affect your emotions? It hugely affects your emotions. And it's so important that they're starting in psychology and in all kinds of things to try to get probiotics that help calm you down, because 50% of your detoxification is happening in your gut with your hormones. Your body is detoxing itself through the gut. And we don't realize it. We think it's just the liver. But when those things get out of whack and you don't have the right neurotransmitters, your brain can't calm you down because your gut's upset. That's why they call it the second brain. There's a thing called a vagus nerve, and it goes from the gut all the way up to the brain. And it's bacteria. It's actually an intelligence that communicates with the brain to tell you how to respond to things. And we're not aware of that. We aren't aware of all the things that bacteria does. But if you and I are 100 trillion bacteria, and we're more that than anything else, we're 10 times more bacteria than cells in the body, there's a reason that we're that way. And we just haven't connected all the dots to understand all the things that it does. And now science is just exploding with research as to what all bacteria does within the body.
So, Donna, do you eat more cultured foods than you eat other kinds of foods? As I'm hearing you talk about this, I'm starting to lead into this idea that we should be eating massive amounts of cultured foods.
Okay, that's a really, really good question. And no, I do not do that, because here's the deal. You don't need to eat massive amounts of cultured foods because, for instance, one spoonful of cultured vegetables, which could be a pickle that's fermented, not the kind in the stores that are canned and have vinegars in them, the kinds that I'm talking about that are cultured or fermented, or one spoonful of like vegetables that are sauerkraut, has more probiotics than a whole bottle of supplements. And that gives you the strains of bacteria. And then you have to feed the strains of bacteria prebiotic foods. And prebiotic foods are fruits and vegetables, nuts, seeds, and grains, oats, certain legumes. There's a bunch of prebiotics. And that bacteria feeds on that fiber that we can't digest and grows and multiplies. So the prebiotic foods are just as important as the probiotic foods. The probiotic foods give you the strains that many of us have killed through antibiotic use or antibacterial, or even diet can kill. High processed foods can kill those bacteria. So we put those back in with the cultured foods. And we're talking maybe like a cup or two of kefir a day, a few spoonfuls of kraut, maybe a half a cup. I like the kombucha fermented tea, just like 8 to 16 ounces. That's plenty. And then you can have more if you want. It doesn't matter. And then lots of prebiotics to make those strains grow. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, I love the way that you laid it out so clear for everyone. And one thing that I've noticed when drinking kombucha or kefir, to always drink it with food. And I've heard that it helps to actually keep them alive when you drink it with food instead of the stomach acid killing the bacteria. Is that true?
No, that's not true at all. That's true with the supplements, but it's not true with the food, because food has a protective halo around it. So it goes through the body faster and it's also protected. And for instance, this is really cool. Like, for instance, kombucha has a special bacteria in it called Saccharomyces bordii, and it's one of the most researched and strongest probiotics in the world today. They use it in a lot of hospitals, not necessarily in the United States, but in a lot of European countries. They use it quite profoundly with all kinds of digestive or C. diffs or all kinds of problems, and it works so well. And the reason it works so well is it coats the lining, the intestinal lining, and keeps out pathogens, and it acts like a pathogen and attracts pathogens to it. When the pathogen gets to it, it kills it. And the really cool thing about this bacteria is that cannot be killed by antibiotics because it's a probiotic yeast. And this yeast is so powerful that it can survive antibiotics. But the only thing that you need to know about this is that it doesn't last in the body very long. It only lasts like 2 to 3 days. So you need to have some more tea. And you don't need to have it with food. You can have it by itself. It still works just as well because it's in a food substance. The body, things go through the body faster when you eat them than they do. For instance, a pill has to be digested, so it sits in the stomach acids, and they usually get killed by the stomach acids, whereas a food doesn't do that. It goes straight to the parts of the body that it's needed, and it works so profoundly that you can have it with or without food.
Okay, so you got me convinced that cultured foods are fantastic. You've got me into the idea that I'm okay with trying some of these foods that look a little weird, smell a little funny, are different than what other people are eating. But at the same time, they're foods. You go to a baseball game and you're eating things that look, smell, and taste like the real cultured foods. So you've really been also great with us in making a distinction about what most people are buying and what most people are tasting is not the exact same thing that you're talking about. So where would I go and get the real thing?
Well, you can get them at most any health food store, and they're in the refrigerated sections. They're not in the canned sections. They're living cultures, so they usually need to be refrigerated. If they're not refrigerated, then they're usually not alive because bacteria has to stay alive by having some food in there. So, and putting it in a cooler section slows that bacteria down so that it stays alive longer. And the krauts are in there. You can find things like kefir, which is like a fermented drink that's similar to yogurt. It can be non-dairy. It can be regular. They both work fantastic. And also the kombucha tea would be in the refrigerated section. Usually it's got its own section. It's growing so fast that most stores are giving it its own little section now. And you also can make them, which is what I teach people to do because it's a lot less expensive, but it's also a lot of fun. And it's super easy. It's new to everybody. People think this is hard. They're going to mess it up like you were. You're scared about it. And it's not hard. It's just new. And it's one of the easiest things you can do. It's easier than if you want to make your own kefir, which is, they call it the champagne of yogurt. It takes you 24 hours and it takes literally 5 minutes to make. It's super fun. And then you can have gallons and gallons of this stuff in your fridge. And same with the vegetables. They're just chopping vegetables, putting them in a jar, covering with water, and putting in a culture, letting them ferment, do their thing, and then stick them in the fridge where they'll last like 9 months. And the same with the vegetables that you can buy at the store. They last a long, long time in your fridge because they're preserved. And when you eat them, they preserve you.
Yeah, we used to have these big parties where everybody would bring organic vegetables. We'd chop them all up. And then one time we made up to 11 gallons of cultured vegetables at one time. And it was a really great way to do it. And then we had cultured vegetables all winter long.
And I'm curious, is this healthy to give like young babies, young children, our kids? Is this a healthy thing for kids to be consuming as well?
Well, this is really where I started with my daughter. She was born prematurely, like 8 weeks, and I was sick and she was sick. And it was really my effort to help her. And I would give her tiny little spoonfuls, every day. And I watched her transform in a month. And I just couldn't believe she went from A to Z in just a month. And that was a real wake-up call for me. So I began to eat them, and then I changed. And it just went from there because all of us are bacteria. All of us are, if you're nursing, if you have a baby and you're nursing, you should eat them and they'll get them. It's the greatest thing in the world. And, the more healthy bacteria that you set as a foundation for your child, it just changes everything. It changed everything for our family. It changed everything for my little girl. And it made such a difference. And kids love them, and they don't need very much. It works really, really well and effective. And follow your own instincts on, as you have the bacteria inside of you as a mom or as a parent. When you're in a room with somebody, you're giving people your bacteria. They took 7 families and moved them into different homes with their cats and dogs. And literally within minutes, they transformed the room with their bacteria. So if you're healthy, your children and your people around you are getting that. And so this is not just about you getting healthy. This is about affecting the world around you. Because as you ingest these foods and as you grow your microbiome and you get more healthy, you literally take it with you and you walk into a room and you give it to the people that are there. I was on a plane not too long ago and there was a baby that was throwing up on the mom and she was crying. And the mom was upset because she didn't have anybody to help her. So I offered to hold the baby while the mom went and cleaned up all the stuff that the baby had thrown up on her. And when I got off the plane, the stewardess stopped me and said, "Thank you so much for doing that. We so appreciate that. I just hope that you don't get the flu." And I said, "I'm not afraid of the flu. The flu should be afraid of me because I'm serious. I feel that way. I don't get the flu anymore. I don't get sick anymore. My immune system, which bacteria is also very responsible for building up your immune system so you don't get these viruses. It destroys these viruses and pathogens that come into your body, but only if you feed and take care of it. So it's not just about being healthy yourself. You're going to affect that baby that you're holding in your arms just by have a healthy microbiome yourself.
I'd love to hear a little bit more about the benefits that you've seen people experience from eating cultured foods or that you know of.
Well, I mean, it's ridiculous. I've never seen anything like it. We got an hour. It just goes on. And there's stuff I learn every day. I had a news story, that somebody told me the other day, and I had no idea that these foods would help that. But, in the beginning, I decided I wasn't going to tell everybody because they thought I was crazy, letting things ferment on my counter. But I couldn't stand it because my daughter had food allergies and she'd healed them by having a cultured food at every meal. So I told my friends because their kids were struggling, I couldn't stand to see them suffer, and they got better. And then my other friend's little boy, asthma, he got rid of his asthma inhaler. And then her husband got rid of his acid reflux. And then somebody's cholesterol normalized. And then everybody stopped getting colds and flus and sick all summer. And they'd go through the whole winter and not get anything. And I saw people with kidney functions improve because bacteria, when you have enough good bacteria, it eats the toxins in the urea that clean up the kidney problems. And she didn't have to go on dialysis. I had one guy that had hepatitis that was so bad he thought he was really on death's door, and he brought his whole life back. And these are all on my Lives Touch page on my website, and you can read the stories yourself. And it's astounding. And I had a new one that I had never heard of. A lady had venereal disease for 13 years, and it was awful, and she had flare-ups every month, and they were awful. She had been molested, I guess, is what happened. It's a very sad story. But for the first time, I think it was either 13 or 20 years she'd had it. I can't remember now. But after having this kefir every month, she wasn't having any more flare-ups anymore. And she said it was such a miracle. It changed her whole life. It changed her marriage because she wasn't living in fear of that, these terrible side effects that she was getting from having this disease. And it's so amazing, all the things that it does I'm just learning about all of them. And I've been doing it for 15 years. But every week, I'm getting the emails. I've often told people they wouldn't believe me if they got all this stuff. If they heard all of the stories and all the wonderful things that it's helped. But it makes sense because you and I are bacteria, and we're 100 trillion bacteria, and they're in us for a reason. They're here to help us live a healthy life as long as we take care of them.
It's really incredible to hear that. Something that we believe here at Thriving Launch is that if you take care of the body and the mind, you don't have to go and do these crazy things like, go see traditional doctors and be completely medicated and you don't have to suffer. And that's one of the reasons why we've created this show. And it's one of the reasons why we brought you on, because we know the power of cultured foods. We've been experimenting with them for several years now. At least for me personally, Kamala really got me onto them. And at first I was a little reluctant because these things look kind of weird. They smell weird. Nobody's eating them. Or if they're so great, why aren't they really being used by other people? But I can attest to how awesome they are. One last question here before we wrap up is, and I think this is something that's already been answered, but at the same time, I know that it's a question that maybe will help convince or push people over the edge a little bit. A lot of people are really interested in fitness and losing weight and having the ideal physique. Do cultured foods help with weight loss or stopping kind of those hunger pangs, or help us kind of reduce how much we need some of those bad, unhealthy foods? Can they help with weight loss and the body that way too as well?
Yeah, they do, because basically when you feed your microbes, if you can think about feeding your microbes, they kind of take care of that for you. Because it's interesting. And we could have a whole show on this, but as they eat fiber, which we can't really digest. That's what they love, and they love soluble fiber because there's different types of fiber. And they eat that, and that grows. And what happens is that they grow and multiply, and they reduce your blood sugar. They reduce inflammation. You're less hungry. If you feed them, you're not as hungry. You're nourished because they're nourished. And they control your cravings. If you have cravings for sugars and fats and processed foods, it's because you have a microbiome that you have fed like that, and that's what they're craving. And you've noticed that as you feed them healthy fruits and vegetables, you change and get more of those microbes, and you have less of the other. And it's so amazing to watch. And you can play around with this. But when I go to the grocery store, I think, okay, my microbes like that, and they like that, and they like that, because they take care of me if I take care of them. And the interesting thing about all this is that in the very beginning, I was really sick. I had diabetes. I had high blood pressure. My daughters had irritable bowel. We had all these problems. And I didn't know what the answers were. I mean, my doctors were saying, well, you've got diabetes. It runs in your family. And I had a lot of diabetes in my family. And both kinds, type 1 and type 2. I had a high blood pressure. I had all these things. And they said, this is just genetics, And it made me really mad, because I thought, I don't want to get pigeonholed just because of this. And I decided I was going to find an answer. And the most wonderful thing is, I never expected the answer that would come to me in food, but it's something that I loved. It would make me pay attention. And these microbes that sit on my counter inside my jars changed my food. I ate them, and then they changed me. And they changed me in such a miraculous way that it made me feel loved. It made me feel cared for. It started to affect every area of my life. And I went from laying on the couch, being so sad, to feeling like I didn't even recognize my life. And now I have a business, and I teach classes, and I never wanted to be an author. I didn't know how to write a book. And now I have 2 bestsellers, and I just blew my mind that changing what I ate didn't just change my body. It changed my entire life, because I felt good. And when you feel good, you do good, and you change everybody around you. It's contagious.
Really can feel that energy. It's so powerful to hear you talk about it. You clearly know your subject matter very well. You know it so deeply. It's not just in the head, but it's in your heart and in your gut. And just really appreciative of you sharing your story, and how amazing it is to watch this energy and this knowledge pour out of you.
Well, when something changes you so dramatically, you pay attention. And I never want to go back to that life. I wasn't living. That wasn't even I was just existing. And I wanted so badly to feel good. And I just am so surprised that it came in the form of these little tiny invisible microbes that live inside of me that I can't even see. But they're there. And they care about us. All they care about is you when they're living inside of you. And when you take care of them, you connect with them, it's the greatest secret ever. It's a gift that we all have that nobody really knows about. And that's my job, nobody loves microbes like I do. It's crazy. But, that's my little piece of the world where I can help share what has made me well with others, and hopefully change them too.
Well, such a deep gratitude to Donna of Cultured Food Life for coming on to Thriving Launch and blessing us all with this information about cultured foods, and how we can all add a little bit of culture to our meals to experience more health, mental clarity, and emotional stability. You've been listening to the Thriving Launch podcast. For books and resources related to today's episode, make sure to head over to thrivinglaunch.com. We'll see you there.
How do you get more out of life? By finding which things to say yes to and no to. On our next episode, we've brought on Shauna McKenzie to discuss how to get more out of life. So be sure to tune in.